All right. So we were 15 minutes early, so hopefully you had time to write your class. Okay, we got it done. We're okay then. So we'll go ahead and turn our attention to Brother Rich speaking on Samson.
Good evening, brothers and sisters, young people. Great to see everyone again. This is a perfect time to give a talk, after a massive dinner of pasta and fried chicken. Everyone should be wide awake and ready to go. All right. So we're going to be looking today, this evening anyways, at a character that, I think we probably learned in Sunday school, right? There's a lot of different ways to look at the life of Samson. We're going to take a look at the life of Samson in regards to the interaction between the people of Judah, the people of Dan, and the Philistines. Remember, as we're going to see, they lived right next door to each other. They were neighbors, literally neighbors. There was, villages that belonged to the Hebrews, and then maybe 5 miles down the road, there was a village that was inhabited by the Philistines. So a lot of interaction, a lot of cultural appropriation, between both of them. So we'll take a look at it. We'll take a look at maybe some lessons for us, some exhortative lessons about Samson. Samson was a wonderful character. Very strong guy, but he was weak in some areas that are eventually going to cost him his life. But we'll take a look at that. All right, world famous Lee cap. Very quickly, I don't want to get yelled at here. Look at this. I gotta click it now. Look out! Look out! All right. Israel is going to conquer the central hill country of Canaan. Remember, we talked about that. The marriages are going to take place. Israel is rapidly beginning to lose their national identity, their culture, and their religion as a people. They're being lost. They're marrying. They're taking on the religious ideas of the Canaanites that lived there, the marriage ideas, all of these things, the cultural ideas. They're losing their identity. And so, sometimes we can look at the events of the Judges and of Joshua and like, wow, there's a lot of death and dying and, like wiping out other people and all that. It's not great from our point of view. And that's true, right? But we also have to look at it from the point of view of God had his people, this very small, relatively small group of people that came into the land. And immediately they were set on all sides by other people. And so it was imperative for the children of Israel to make sure that they had land for themselves. They had borders for themselves. This is an area for Jewish people. This is an area for the Hebrews and for nobody else. And God understood that if there were other people in that, exactly what happened in the history of Israel was going to happen. And that's what happened. Israel was almost completely lost to history. We don't hear about the Ammonites anymore. They're not around. The Moabites, who were they? Edom? Gonzo. They're not around anymore. But Israel is. And I think of all the things that we've talked about today, that is like the one big thing in my mind, anyways, is like, how did this group of people, Israel, who are you? How did you survive all of this stuff for 3,500 years? It's a miracle. It literally is a miracle. All right. They're taking on the characteristics of the Canaanite people. The Philistines were the greatest enemy of both the tribe of Judah, but also of Dan, as we're going to see. Judah and Dan were right next to each other, and guess who was right next to Judah and Dan? The Philistines. They came from the west, from Greece, Crete, other Mediterranean islands. The sea peoples, the migration from west to east, looking for fertile ground and cities that they could capture and take over and live there. And they're eventually going to settle along the southern coast of modern-day Israel. Today is called the Gaza Strip. There is one interesting thing that I want to talk about here. It's interesting to me anyways. Some historians have said that part of the deal after the big battle between the sea peoples in Egypt, they kind of came to a deal. And Egypt gave them, they said, look, why don't you settle in this area? We're going to give you this land. It's your land now. You settle it. Do what you want with it. And they may have done this for the Philistines to be a buffer between Egypt as a country and any other invading armies or people. And so the Philistines were up in the north, right? Egypt is down in the south, and so they were kind of used as a buffer in the eyes of Egypt. So it makes sense politically. It makes sense militarily if they're going to give these sea peoples this land along the coastline, and that's what they did. But we know that Israel is also in the land at this time, and we know that there's going to be a massive conflict. All right. This is interesting. From Judges 6, verse 32. Therefore, on that day, Gideon was called Jerubbaal. Let Baal contend against him because he broke down his altar. Now, if we remember the story of Gideon, they found his name, Jerubbaal, is right there, right? His name is mentioned right here. Okay, so this was found in Israel. It's dated from this time, from the time of the judges. So, was this the Jerubbaal that we're talking about in Scripture? Maybe. But it certainly was a name, and it was a name that was found on, some type of probably, pottery or a bowl or something like that. So I found that pretty interesting. All right. These are called the Amara tablets. And the reason we're showing you this here is it gives us an indication that the Egyptians recognized the Hebrew people as an entity in the land of Canaan during this time. I'm not going to read all of this, but this was a letter sent by one of the chiefs of the different towns. This was sent by one of the mayors of one of these towns in the middle of what's modern day Israel, in the hill country. And we know that Israel came in, and what did they do? Well, they took over the hill country. We actually have a source that goes along with that confirms that. Let's look at this second paragraph here. This is sent to the king or to Pharaoh. Okay, this is one of his governmental offices that was up in Canaan at the time before they withdrew. Let the king listen to Erheba, your servant. Okay, so he's writing this. And send an army of archers that they might restore the land of the king to the king. For if there are no army of archers, the land of the king will fall away to the Habriai, the Habruai. That sounds very similar to the word Hebrew. Okay? And a lot of scholars have said that, in fact, this word here is an ancient form of the word Hebrew. So the Hebrews are coming in, right? They're going into this land, and they're taking over different cities. Well, what does Joshua and what does Judges talk about? Well, it talks about that very event. And so we actually have these tablets, these letters, these communications, these governmental dispatches. We have copies of them today that supports the fact that there were Hebrews in the land and they were conquering things. They weren't just hanging around. They were conquering things. And the Egyptians knew about it. The Goliath inscription. Ooh, now we're getting good. This was found in 2005 at a place called Tel Asafai of Gath as well. So right around Gath, we know that, well, Goliath was from Gath, right? And so on this little shard right here is the name Goliath, right? And it was written in kind of a very old Canadian, an old Canadian script, Canaanite script. And when it was found at the level of the Iron Age, which coincides exactly with the time period that we're talking about, right? From 1100 to 1000 BC. And obviously it fits with the narrative and time frame of the story. Imagine finding this. You're digging around, you find this shard and it has Goliath's name on it. Imagine, a lot of the people that go and do the archaeology are from the, Bible Institute, that type of thing. And so they look at the Bible as the Word of God, and it guides them in where they dig and what they're interested in. And so imagine being the guy or the woman that found this, the name of Goliath on this shard. You're like, oh my word, the Bible's coming to life, right? And so all of these things, this is all evidence that what the Bible says, the events of the Bible, are true. And this is a perfect example. This isn't a made-up story. This happened. There were a people called the Philistines. there was some type of massive warrior named Goliath, and his name is written down for us. At the very least, brothers and sisters, the name Goliath was apparently popular during this time. All right? At the very least. Did I go 2 or 1? Yes, I did. Okay. What area are we talking about here? Where are we putting ourselves? Well, right here is Timnath. This right here is where Samson is going to live. If you look at this key right here, okay, what does this say? 10 miles. All right? 10 miles. So we're talking about an area of 10 miles. They were right next to each other, brothers and sisters. Okay? And so when the account talks about Samson going down to Timnath, right? He's physically walking down here from the hills, right? This is the hills. He's going down, literally down into the valley of Sorek where Timnath is. But let's keep this in mind. He's physically walking down, but in a lot of ways, spiritually, he's walking down as well, right? He's going to be with the Philistines. In fact, brothers and sisters, we're going to find out that he's going to marry a Philistine woman. We're going to see what happens there. It's not great, by the way. I'm not going to spoil it for you. You can visit Timnath today. Here it is. Modern day Timnath, still around. Not bad. A lot of trees, right? Sometimes we don't think about Israel as having trees. It does have trees. And here you go. All right. You can actually go here to the ancient city of Timnath and see, some of the, the ruins of this city. By the time of Samson, Timnath had been around for a while. In fact, it's mentioned in the, in the pretty horrible story of Judah and Tamar in Genesis 38, verse 12. It's mentioned there. And again, obviously, Judah is in this area, and this is where the tribe of Judah is going to settle, which fits the narrative as well. Joshua mentions it as a border town of the tribe of Judah. That's what it was. So think about this. Samson is going down to a border town. So that means that he's going to grow up along the border of the Philistines and of the Hebrews. All right? And it seems to me anyways that Samson was he was at ease in both places. He could go obviously to his kin and his family in Israel, but he had no problem going down and socializing and interacting with the Philistines. In fact, he went down to the Philistines quite a bit in the account, right? And then lastly, known for its high-quality vineyards and the wine. And let's just take a look from Judges 14. I think I know what this is, but I'm not sure. This is going to be, we'll see if this is the right verse anyways. It's like a surprise, a birthday surprise. All right, 14. Oh, yeah, here we go. Then Samson went down and his father and his mother to Timnath and came to the vineyards of Timnath. Okay, so it was known to have all of these vineyards. They're making the wine, that type of thing. And Samson's right in the mix of all of this. Okay, Samson is a great story that kind of coincides with everything that we've been talking about here, right? The pressure and the influence of other people on Samson and the children of Israel. All right? Okay. So Beth-Shemesh is mentioned. All right? What was that Beth-Shemesh? There was evidence during this time that it was some type of pagan temple complex. All right? But it was taken over by the Israelites, then it was taken over by the Canaanites, and then the Philistines came in. So this town of Beth-Shemesh, was passed through 3 different types of people. And we have evidence that the Philistines turned this temple or this complex into a pen for animals. So they desecrated it. Okay? So this was a Canaanite temple or some type of religious structure. The Philistines are going to come in, and they're going to go, we don't care about any of this stuff. We have our own gods. We're going to build our own temples, and they ended up just using it as a pen for animals. So who the deity was that was being worshipped by the Canaanites before the Philistines came in, who knows? But anyways, and so this is just an example of how often these border towns would change hands, particularly along, the Philistines and Israel and Judea. And you can see once again those two. Is that stone? No, forget I said anything about that. Whoa. Uh-oh. Draw a shape to create a screen snip. No. Okay, good. Whew. Crisis averted. They've actually found what's called the Samson seal. Found in Beth Shemesh, 2012, and it's dated to this time period that we're talking about. Surprise, surprise. And what does it show? Well, it shows a long-haired man fighting a lion. Okay. Is that an event recorded in Scripture about Samson? Absolutely. Okay, so it sounds like someone made this to commemorate some type of event, a seal. Now, some people have said that, oh, it's not Samson, that's really a picture of Hercules. Okay, I mean, I like the lion, Samson, this guy with long hair, okay, he was a Nazarite, couldn't cut his hair, makes sense, all right? Now listen, is this a Picasso? It kind of is a Picasso. It's not a Rembrandt, okay? So you can kind of make out things, right? Here's the lion, that's the lion's tail, here's Samson right here. Got a long hair right there. Boom, big fight, big fight. All right, any questions before we go on to the actual story? There's a lot of evidence for this, by the way, brothers and sisters. So here's the thing. When someone says that, hey, the Bible's made up stories, right? You now have some evidence that you actually know. They've found tremendous amounts of archaeological evidence that supports the stories that are found in the Bible, particularly in Judges and in Kings. What is going on? All right, here we go. So the events of Samson's life are going to be found in Judges 13 to 16. We don't have to look it up, but, we all know this story. Let's remember, brothers and sisters, that Israel is kind of hemmed in the mountains, in the hills of Israel right there in the red. Everything else in the green is controlled by somebody else. All of the green down in the south is controlled by the Philistines. If we go here on the south and then over to the right, you have Moab and Edom down there, and Ammon. Israel really has no place to go. They're hemmed into the hill country. A reminder that the Philistines are going to control the south coast. We did that, okay? Dan and Judah are going to border Philistia. They're going to be right on the border of the Philistines. Israel lives up in the hill country. They weren't strong enough to drive out the Philistines, these sea peoples. And the reason for that, we already talked about, was because of their military technology. The Philistines controlled and oppressed the Danites and Judah. As an aside, we're talking about military technology. We talked briefly about the chariot and how effective the chariot was against standing armies. We have a story about that, don't we, in Judges? What story is that? Who can remind us? Deborah and Barak. Thank you very much. Yes. Sisera, right? He had his army of chariots. God sent a massive storm. They all got stuck. They couldn't be used effectively. In fact, if you do a deep dive on that battle, you can see that Israel kind of lured them up into a path where they only could go single file. They had to go single file up this path. It was very tight with their chariots, so they couldn't spread them out. And then once they got into this place, this is where Israel ambushed them. And it talks about that. They're coming down from Mount Ephraim, and they ambushed these guys in the storm. And they were victorious over it. So remember, we talked about this. Israel is going to be successful, number one, when they trust in God. Number two, when they do hit-and-run tactics. Israel was great at that. All right? Remember the story of Abraham and the king of Sodom? And they took Lot. I forget it. He had a big, long name, right? From Mesopotamia, he came down. And Lot was taken captive. Abraham took, his servants that he had trained as soldiers. And does anyone know when they attacked these guys? At nighttime, right? When did Gideon attack the massive host of the Midianites? At nighttime, okay? And so this is classic, Hebrew kind of hit and run tactics. This is what they did best, and David is going to kind of refine this process. Saul will refine it a little bit, kind of build a centralized army and a centralized government. David will build on that. Solomon will build on that as well. Okay? Samson's parents were from the tribe of Dan. They had no children. An angel is going to appear to Manoah's wife and tell her that she will have a son. He would be a Nazirite. What were some of the things that a Nazirite couldn't do? Drink alcoholic beverages, right? Cut his hair were kind of the two big things. He couldn't defile them himself because of something dead. Who was I talking to about that? I was talking to somebody about that today. About, did he keep his, did Samson keep the vow of the Nazirite? Did he? I don't know. I think in some cases he did. Curtis? Yeah, it was you. That's right. I wanted to give you credit because you said you were going to stand up and take credit for it. I don't want that to happen. So we'll take a look at that. And he's going to save. He's going to be. Let me just say this. He is going to begin the process of saving Israel from the Philistines. All right, because this isn't something that happens overnight. I think there's an excitation in that, brothers and sisters, that, when we go through trials and tribulations, we want it fixed right away. We don't want to deal with that, the hurt. We want to deal with the pressure, the anxiety of kind of dealing with something, right? We want God to fix it right now. But God often doesn't work that way, right? He could have saved Israel with Samson and could have, Philistines are gone. But it's going to take decades before the Philistines are completely defeated by Israel. Okay? Takes a while. They had to be patient. We have to be patient when we suffer affliction, when we go through trials and tribulations. We can't lose heart. We can't be impatient with God. Here's the other thing, too. There is a pattern in Scripture, by the way, brothers and sisters, where you have a couple that can't have children, but then are blessed, right? We've read about Jacob and Rachel. Okay, she couldn't. She says to Jacob, "Give me children, or I'm going to die. I'm going to die." She says she couldn't handle it. Elkanah, right, and Hannah. That type of thing as well. Who else? Oh, Elizabeth and Zechariah, right? Couldn't have kids. They were blessed. Abraham and Sarah. Did we go? Yes. Okay. All right. So this is a story about a very great and powerful man. But there's a lot of spiritual lessons in the story of Samson, right? You can do kind of a superficial, like, Sunday school situation with Samson and just kind of talk about, all the great feats. And that's great, right? We need to know that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of spiritual lessons, I think, in the life of Samson. He falls in love with a Philistine girl. Whomst among us? The Philistines, right? Samson had, he just liked the foreign girls. For whatever reason, he was drawn to these types of girls. The next slide, I'm going to show you why he was drawn to them. They're beautiful. Okay? We'll see. So he's going to demand his parents. He says, "Get this woman, right, that I want to have to wife." And she's like, and they're like, "No, it was, you can't marry a Philistine. What are you, crazy?" And he's not listening to anybody, right? He's pig-headed. He's going to go. And so they're actually going to have like a wedding, party or something like that. Yeah, wedding party. Demands that the parents support his marriage, so the event will cause Samson and the Philistines to detest each other. This is going to be, this is an event where this marriage is supposed to be combining two families, but also two groups of people. I mean, Samson was a judge after all, and this judge is marrying a Philistine. What? But this was, this may have been, and I'm just spitballing here, but this may have been, Samson's way too of kind of bringing the people together in his mind. I don't know, but this was not a great idea, It's going to turn out horrible. But this event and this decision by Samson ultimately will bring about the defeat in this situation of the Philistines through Samson, okay? We're not going to get into the riddle, but he killed a lion with his bare hands, right? And inside of the carcass there was honey, and he told this riddle. It's kind of unfair to use this as a riddle. It's like Samson, no one will ever know this riddle at all. And I think he probably did that on purpose, right? Because he wanted to get some, new clothes, new threads. 30 garments, right? If they could figure out the riddle, he owed them 30 garments. If they didn't, they owed him 30 garments. All right? Now listen, these garments here, okay, this is like 30 outfits. This wasn't something you pulled off the rack of Walmart or something like that for $10. This was very expensive to make. These garments were very expensive. Okay, 30 garments, it's a lot of money. All right? So this was going to set back either the Philistine wedding party, or it's going to set back Samson. We know it ends up setting back Samson. Eventually, without getting into it, Samson goes down to another Philistine city and kills 30 guys there and takes all their clothes and then gives it to the people in Timnath, which on some level is kind of, the whole thing is it's craziness. But anyways, his wife, his father-in-law are going to be killed. And their whole house is burnt with fire. Can we see the kind of escalation here, brothers and sisters? All right. First it's very peaceful. It's a wedding party. It's great. Well, we have this we have this riddle that is given by Samson. He loses, right, because they kept on pressuring his wife. He loses 30 garments. He goes down, kills 30 Philistines, and then comes back. So they find out about it. They kill his father-in-law and his wife. They burn the house with fire. All right, there's no love lost at all now. Okay, it's, as they say, this is like a blood feud that's going on now between Samson and the Philistines. They just killed his wife and his wife's family, right? All right. Oh, look at this beauty. This is kind of like a bust that they found. I think it's made out of wood or something like that. But if you see right here, that's a close-up of this right here. They would slowly elongate this area right here in the ear. I think they still do this today. Different types of gauges, right, that they put in the ear. It's for all the young kids. And they will slowly spread that out, and then they would put these kind of decorative, circles inside of the ears. All right, and they've found hundreds of these in these different sites right here. So maybe, he liked this situation. I don't know. All right, here we go. Here's a couple pictures. I thought these pictures were cool. Look at him with all the garments. He's just like. There's a lot of things in Samson's life that are kind of humorous, but anyways, there's a greater lesson to be learned. So Samson's just not going to sit around and say, "Oh yeah, you guys win. You just killed my father-in-law and my wife. Burn them with fire. That's cool. I'm done." He's not going to do that. Number one, because he was a judge. He was a leader of Israel. And number two, on a base level, he wanted revenge. Revenge was very important in the ancient world. So he's going to burn down the wheat fields of the Philistines. Remember we talked about that? The flat plains where the Philistines lived was perfect growing ground for wheat. Oh, we're told that he burns down with the help of some foxes, right? He burns down all of their crops. This was a massive economic loss for the Philistines. This was a massive food production loss for the Philistines as well. And so in a lot of ways, this is kind of like economic warfare that Samson is kind of dealing with here, right? There's millions and millions of dollars in today's money in that field that he burned to the ground, okay? And so the animosity, the hatred continues to grow in both sides, right? The Philistines on one side, Samson on the other. No one's backing down. You ever been in the middle of a situation like that? Right? Maybe a couple of your friends or whatever, they're not getting along and they're just fighting. No one's backing down. There's no compromise. It's not great. This is the situation right here. Okay? Now, the Philistines are going to go to the tribe of Judah and they're going to say, look, this guy is causing some real problems. If you don't get a handle on him, we're going to deal with you. We're going to come and we're going to exact our vengeance on you. And so Samson actually has this interaction, right, with his brethren from Judah. And he says, don't kill me. That's the only thing. I don't want to be killed by my brethren. You can turn me over to the Philistines, no problem. Right? And so he gets bound. Samson's given as a prisoner to the Philistines. And then, boom, it says the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. Right? He rips up his vines and he wipes out the Philistines with a jawbone of a donkey. And so again, more and more escalation, more and more violence on both sides, right? The Philistines have had enough of Samson. He's obviously causing a lot of economic damage, but also he's rallying the people. When the people hear that Samson, he burned down the fields of the Philistines, they're like, yes! When they find out that, the Philistines are being put to the worst by this Hebrew, he becomes a star. He becomes the guy that everyone's looking at. Star. You like that star? All right, here we go. A couple other pictures, right? Samson taking on a group of Philistines. Boom. Incredible stamina. And here he goes right here. He takes, one of the city gates and he hauls it away. Now, what was he doing, by the way, here? That he had to escape. Anybody? He was visiting a woman, right, a woman of the night. It says that he was visiting a harlot. So now we have two events where Samson has gotten himself into trouble having to do with foreign women. You think God is trying to tell his people a lesson there, teach them a lesson? He's trying to teach us a lesson? Yeah, he's teaching us a lesson. So twice, Samson almost loses his life because of bad decisions with women. All right, let's keep that in mind. It's going to get worse, believe me. All right. Through all of this, Samson is going to judge Israel for like 20 years, okay? So we have really a condensed version. 20 years of his life, or however old he was, he's going to judge for 20 years. But we only have 3 chapters concerning his life and his death. Okay, so there's a lot more going on that isn't recorded for us. But that's okay. We have enough. Samson falls in love again. He's like Taylor Swift, right? He's the Taylor Swift of the ancient world, right? This time it's with Delilah. Delilah actually is going to be used by the lords of the Philistines, right? She obviously was very beautiful, right? So a lot of manipulation, a lot of psychological warfare going on. The Philistines knew that Samson had a weakness for foreign women. And so they found the most beautiful girl, Delilah, and said, turn on your charm. And she goes and she's, they have a relationship. Who knows what this relationship was like? It wasn't healthy, believe me. I think they say it's toxic. They were in a toxic relationship. So there's a lot of shenanigans that go on in this situation. He's telling her all kinds of things, right? Bowstrings, new rope will definitely do it. The hair in the loom, I have a picture of that, right? I'll put my hair in a loom. Nothing I can do about it. And so eventually, over and over and over again, Delilah is going to kind of weaken Samson, right? And just keep on nagging him. Why? You don't love me. I wish you loved me, Samson. Tell me where your strength comes from. And eventually he gives in and he says, look, I'm a Nazarite from birth. I can't cut my hair. My strength is in my hair. All right? And if they cut my hair, he says, I'm going to be as weak as a normal man. Whoa. And I think Delilah knew, this is the answer that I was looking for, okay? Here he is. Look at the loom. Look at, he's got his hair in the loom. Couldn't stop him. Now, finally, right here, Delilah finally gets what she needs. Look, he's kind of holding the locks there, and he's like, what have I done? And the Philistines have him. And so, 3 strikes and you're out, Samson. Like, this is the 3rd time. And now he's trapped. Now he doesn't have his strength. God has left him. He's by himself. All that strength that he relied on was gone. And the very thing that got him into trouble, the Philistines took away. Gouged out his eyes. Okay? You can't be a strong man with no eyes, Samson. Right? The thing is, Samson couldn't be tempted anymore for foreign women. And I wonder what he was thinking about, brothers and sisters, as he went round and round and round like an animal grinding grain. How many turns do you think Samson did? Over and over and over again. He had a lot of time to think. He had a lot of time to meditate. He had the time to think about his situation. No eyes, working like an animal. All his strength is gone. So the Philistines are going to make sport of Samson. And this is very common in the ancient world, right? Samson was like a war trophy. This is the guy. Like when Julius Caesar came back after fighting the Gauls, he brought Vercingetorix with him, who was the leader of the Goths. Yeah, I just dropped some Vercingetorix on you. And so eventually he's going to be taken, and he's going to be ritually killed in front of the, forum. And so this was part of it. You always took like the leader of your enemy, and then in a very public display, killed him. And so it was like a sacrifice to their god, but also it just showed their superiority. Like, we just killed Samson. We can't be stopped. So they bring Samson to the temple of their god Dagon, and they have a massive celebration. Now, there is considerable disagreement on what Dagon was. Okay, some say that he was part fish and part man. All right. Others say no, that's a bad translation. This, that, and the other thing. In any event, Dagon was one of the main gods of the Philistines. They bring him into the temple of Dagon. They're drinking, they're celebrating, they're making fun of Samson. Hey, blind guy, this type of thing. Where's your strength now? A lot like what they did to Jesus on the cross, right? When he was on the cross, even before he was on the cross, the Roman soldiers, punched him, buffeted him. All the sufferings of Christ. And so here is Samson, this once great warrior, brought so low. Samson was so humble during this time. But his hair's back. Now, was his power in his hair? No. The hair was a symbol of the power of God. And Samson's belief in the power of God, that it could bring salvation. And he showed that by letting his hair grow long. And so they're having a celebration. Now, Samson, let's take a look at it in Judges 16. In verse 27, now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there, and there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Samson made sport. And Samson called upon the Lord and said, O Lord, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Samson's still in the revenge game, brothers and sisters. He still owes the Philistines for his eyes, okay? And so when I say it's a blood feud, it's an absolute blood feud, all right? No one's going to stop until they're both dead. Well, what happens? Well, let's see. So he prays to God, help me to avenge my eyes. Strengthen me, he says. It's interesting, brothers and sisters, that Samson doesn't say, hey, just God, please wipe out these Philistines, right? He says, just give me the strength. I'm going to do it, right? And it says that he has his hands right here. And what does it say? And Samson took hold of the two middle pillars. We saw an example of that this afternoon, upon which the house stood and on which it was borne up, the one with his right and his left. And Samson said, one of the great lines in the Bible, let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might. And the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. So, Samson, he's going to die with the Philistines. And eventually he's going to be avenged and this blood feud is going to end with him and the Philistines. But it's not going to end with the Israelites. There's a little reprieve. Samson gives the Israelites a little breathing room. Okay? For 20 years there's going to be peace. And during that time, Israel is going to kind of gain a little strength. But they're still going to be fighting the Philistines. The Philistines are still going to be a major impediment to their survival. All right, last slide. So what are some of the lessons of Samson? Number one, bad relationships can have major consequences in our lives. All right? Bad decisions can have major consequences in our lives. We all know that. Whether we're old or young, we know that there are always consequences to our behavior. Okay? Think about all the people that Samson hurt by making these decisions. Okay? You're not just hurting yourself usually when we make decisions like this. You hurt a lot of other people. Okay? And we have to keep that in mind as well when we make decisions or we don't make decisions. Be a man or woman of faith. When Samson was in the right state of mind, he was a man of faith. He trusted in God. It's when he started trusting in himself, in his cleverness, and was giving in to his weakness, that he himself became weak. This great strong man was really very weak in an area of his life, and it caused his downfall. Number three, I like a lot. God works through all types of people to bring about his will. That's a fact. And so if you don't think that you're worthy of God working in your life or having him use you as an instrument of his righteousness, you're wrong. We all have an ability, and God sees the ability of everybody in this room. And we need to keep that in mind. Don't get down on yourself. God is going to work through all types of people. Good ones, bad ones, in between, right? Nebuchadnezzar was called the servant of God. Samson had this awful weakness with foreign women, but he was a judge. I think he's actually mentioned in the book of faith in Hebrews 11. Man of faith, okay, in the faith chapter, okay? So God kind of judged him as worthy, as righteous, despite his weaknesses, despite his faults, despite his shortcomings. He still was a righteous individual. And that goes for everybody in this room as well. Don't lose heart. Don't lose hope. Don't get down on yourself. God has a plan, and he's going to bring about his will. Lastly, physical strength and mental strength are two entirely different things. All right? Samson was a very strong man physically. Yet he was weak mentally. He was weak mentally. Got him into trouble. So let's work on our mental toughness. Right? There's a quote in Proverbs, and I'm going to totally butcher it. But it's like, the man that controls his spirit is stronger than a man that takes a city. Okay? Let's remember that. Let's have that spiritual toughness that we need in this day and age. Okay? We don't need to lift 350 pounds. I mean, I do it every day, but no big deal. I don't lift 350 pounds. We have to become spiritually strong. And how do we do that? Well, we know how to do that. It's just doing it on a regular basis, right? Quality and consistency. You ever hear that? Quality and consistency. How's our spiritual life? What's the quality of our spiritual life? What's the quantity of our spiritual life? Where are we as sons and daughters of God? Are we being, sucked in by all the things that the world has to offer? All the things of the world that are going to they're going to fade away. They're going to give us some limited and very small pleasure. for a season, Paul says. The things that are really important, sometimes we just cast aside because we're so busy looking at the things of this world. And don't even get me started with social media, because that's just one aspect of it. But let's be mentally strong people. Let's be spiritually strong people. And let's work together. And so hopefully everybody in this room can all give like super hugs when we're in the kingdom, right? We're all going to give each other, you made it, I made it. This is incredible. I can't believe we made it, right? Think about that time. I'm going to leave you with this one quote, right? Paul says, eye hath not seen, neither has it entered into the heart of man what God has prepared for those that love him.